Is God inviting you to be a saint? No. God is inviting you to be a great saint. So let me convince you that God does indeed want you to be a great saint. In the book of Genesis, the sacred author offers us two very interesting stories about creation, our creation. They are found in chapters 1 and 2. In both stories, you see very clearly that God's act of creation is an act of perfect harmony, order, and love. If you contrast the story that we have in the Bible with stories from the ancient myths, as the Babylonian or the Greek, you will see that their understanding of creation was from chaos, from disorder, from war that took place among the gods. So, for instance, in the Babylonian account of creation, Marduk is a young god, and he is in a battle with Tiamat, who was an older goddess. He kills her with an arrow, and then as she is dying, she is weeping, and out of her two eyes come out the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers. And then out of her corpse, Marduk creates the universe. Then sometime later, he is in another battle, the younger gods against the older gods. And in this battle, he slays King Ku, who was an ally of Tiamat. And after he has done that, then with the god of wisdom, together, they, out of his corpse, they create humans. So you can see in these accounts, there's a lot of chaos, a lot of disorder, shall I say, a lot of evil. Whereas in the story of creation, or in the two stories of creation that we have in the Bible, clearly God is a God of love. Whatever he creates, whatever he does in those 6 days of creation, they are an act of pure love. God does not need to create in order to perfect himself. And so his act of creation, as I said, is an act of pure love. So what does he do? He begins by separating light from darkness, land from water, earth from sky. And then on land, he creates vegetation, and then animals, and then birds, and then fish. And basically, at the end of each day, he says, it is good. And then on the 6th day, he does something that is, in our minds, unimaginable, an act of pure love. And that is that he creates humans, he creates us in his very own image and likeness. And in doing so, basically, God was saying, I am inviting you to enter into a covenant relationship with me where the two of us, God and humans, can live in covenant union, in bliss, in harmony, where there will be no sin. And the result then of God's decision was to offer us original justice. And in original justice, you have incorruptibility. So when there is no sin, there will be no death. Death can only come with sin. And God is not the creator and the author of either sin or death. But because death came into our lives, God basically said, but I will not change my decision. My decision is perfect. It's full of love. And so I will return you to incorruptibility. And we will see this as we go along. Coming back to original justice. So then Adam and Eve's knowledge of God was through pure infusion. They knew God organically. This was part of their nature. When there is no sin, we are perfectly aligned with God. We know God from the inside. See? And then lastly, there was no sin. And because there was no sin, their relationships were harmonious and perfect. Their relationship with God, where, so to speak, the two were one in everything they did. So, for instance, God had full authority, sole possession of all his creatures. What does he do? He shares this authority with Adam when he asks Adam to name the creatures, thereby giving Adam dominion over all creation, asking Adam to act in his name. What an enormous gift as well as responsibility, but because God is in covenant relationship, he is sharing everything. Then there is perfect harmony between Adam and Eve and all of creation. They are at home in creation. Everything in creation is at their beck and call, is at their service. It's for their good. And then we see that they are perfectly at home in themselves as well as with each other. So, for instance, in the second story, chapter 2, verse 25, we are told that they were naked and they knew no shame. Shame is the result of sin. When there is no sin, we are perfectly at ease, comfortable, at home with all that we are. And so Adam and Eve were totally comfortable with all that they were as well as with each other. So, in these harmonious relationships, Adam and Eve are now living in paradise, in perfect bliss and harmony, at one with God, with creation, with themselves and in themselves. And it's within this scenario that God then gives them one last, very, very important piece of advice. It sounds clearly like a warning, because God is very, very concerned about making sure that this relationship between humans, between Adam and Eve and God, would last forever. And in order for that to happen, Adam and Eve need to understand, while God has created them in his image and likeness, and they have become godly creatures, they are not God. And so at all times, they will have to respect God's autonomy and the fact that while God is sharing everything of himself with them, they can never take his place. They can never usurp his identity. And so he warns them by saying, you can eat of the fruits of all the trees in paradise except one tree, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Because God is the unconditioned good, and therefore only God can be the criterion or the yardstick or the measurement of what is good and what is evil. And God was telling them, you might have the temptation of thinking that because you are so one with us, with me, with us, that you then can usurp my position and become God as I am. God already knew that a rebellion had taken place in heaven, where Lucifer, the angel of light, has now become Satan, the angel of darkness. And God knew that Satan would make every effort to destroy him, to destroy God, and the way he would attempt to do this would be by destroying his image and likeness. And so God was saying, be careful. And so you can see in this understanding of our creation as God's image and likeness, we can live, and we do live, in bliss when there is no sin. When we are one with God, we can be free of sin. And when we are free of sin, we will truly know who God is and who we are. And so someone who lived our covenant union with God perfectly was Jesus as one of us. We are told again and again in the Gospels that he was always obedient to his Father. And another human being who lived in total and perfect obedience with God was our Blessed Mother. Behold, the handmaid of the Lord, be it done to me according to your word. And so this is something that you need to remember always. Even if you are burdened with sin, remember always that you have been created in God's image and likeness. God's decision is a perfect decision. God will never renege on this decision. He will always stand by this decision. And we will see as we go along that he will restore this decision of his to create us in his image and likeness, moving us toward original justice in and through his Son, Jesus. So we can always be confident, full of hope, and full of gratitude. God bless you.
Making Great Saints is brought to you by Our Lady's Healing Center. For more information about our healing program, please visit ourladieshealingcenter.com.